Welcome back to WCI-TV, sponsored by Tower MSA Partners. I'm Bob Fryer. We have Dr. Bryan Butler from the Orthopedic Medical Group of Tampa Bay. Good to have you here. OMG, yeah. And a big award winner here, so that's why you're here at WCI. Without violating any HIPAA rules, I'd like to hear the story of who it is that you helped. And this is a nice award because it's not just you, but it's also the person, a real-life example of who it was that you helped, the case study. So without violating the HIPAA rules, just give us an idea of how she was injured.
Well, a very pleasant lady, about 67 years old.
Oh my.
She fell at work and dislocated both of her shoulders.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. So it was not just one, but it was both. And so you can imagine the pain and discomfort she was in. So she came to our office about 2 weeks after the injury.
Yeah.
They reduced the shoulders in the emergency room. And when I saw her, and this is a credit to her, her pain was manageable. You know, any other person who had this type of injury, you know, they would be complaining of 10 out of 10 pain and just really, you know, hysteric and not doing well. She was comfortable with their
dislocated shoulders.
Yeah,
and there's also there were other injuries as well, compounded.
Right, so the dislocation led to two big problems. One, she tore both of her rotator cuffs. So on each shoulder, she tore her rotator cuff.
Poor thing. Which
is bad enough in itself. And then she also, because of dislocations, she stretched out a nerve to her shoulder, and this was on both sides as well. So not only did she tear her tendons, but she also had what we call a nerve palsy.
So what is your approach when you're faced with this? You're like, okay, this is bad.
You got to take both kind of injuries into one, you know, figure out the best treatment for her. The problem with the nerve palsy is it kind of limits our treatment at the beginning, because if you were to, like, say, go in and fix her rotator cuff, if her nerve doesn't recover, then she might not be able to get her arm up over her head.
Okay.
And so when I saw her, she could not actively get her arm up over her head. I could move it, but she couldn't hold it there. And so, you know, there's different treatments for these problems. If it was just a rotator cuff on its own, we would treat it that way. If it was just a nerve injury, we'd treat it that way. But we had to kind of take both injuries into account.
Is part of her recovery a testament to her resilience and the fact that she worked really hard in therapy?
I mean, so the biggest thing for her was, you know, she has to be patient.
Okay.
Right? She, you know, imagine waking up and you can't raise your arm.
Yeah.
And she had to have faith in us and the team that this would recover. And so the first thing we had to do was wait for the nerves to recover.
Okay.
And that took about 3 to 4 months.
But as you said, her pain was manageable, so she wasn't...
Well, yeah, and a lot of that is based on her coping mechanisms.
Okay.
So coping mechanisms, there's studies out there that show people who have good coping mechanisms, good pain tolerance, they do better with injuries.
Well, let me ask you this. What would you attribute the award to? Because you submitted this case for an award. At this point, she can't lift her arms and all that. What happened that you think made the difference?
Well, I say it's the whole team.
Okay.
All right. It's the patient. It's her ability to cope. It's her ability to listen and have faith that things are going to get better.
Yeah.
It was her nurse case manager who came to every appointment with her, you know, walking her through the steps, you know, giving her comfort and guidance. It was the adjuster who allowed us to take care of it, because when you start talking about bilateral injuries, you know, it's going to take a long time to recover. And then it's the therapy afterwards, and then it's the surgery. I mean, she ended up having surgery on both shoulders.
And I know that you're going to be talking to the people here at WCI. It's a nice thing for the people here to hear these real-life studies, because oftentimes they don't actually meet the patients that they are helping. So the struggle is to not allow an actual patient to become a number. And so we've been talking a lot to people about making sure that empathy continues to flow and remembering that these are people at the end of the line. So it's good that you're able to bring these real life studies to them.
But just to finish her course, she ended up getting these bilateral, so both sides, shoulder replacements.
Oh my.
And so she had one done about 4 months after the injury. She had to recover from that one, and then she had the other one about 7 months after the injury. So imagine, you know, going through one big surgery, which is major in itself, and then knowing you have to do it again. And so at the end, you know, we saw her for about a year after her both injuries, and she went from not being able to raise her arm to be able to raise her arm over her head.
Perfect.
And at last report, when we saw her last, she was 0 out of 10 pain. and she was back to work.
Gratifying work.
Yeah.
Dr. Butler, thank you so much for stopping by.
My pleasure.
Congratulations on your award, and good luck with your speech to WCI.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So much. And again, thank you for watching WCI-TV, sponsored by Tower MSA Partners. I'm Bob Fryer.